is Abdurrahman Saad, otherwise known as Coach Saad. I am a certified mental performance consultant, certified personal trainer, and performance enhancement specialist who over the years has helped many young athletes, coaches, and parents develop the skills physically and mentally to handle their sport, enjoy their sport, and grow to enjoy other things outside of their sport as well. Today, we're going to be talking about a really important topic known as recovery. And when we hear that word, a lot of what we hear right away is resting. And while recovery does have that component of rest, we're going to dive a little deeper into what builds recovery, uh, what does it involve, and how we can break it down to be a little bit more approachable without it seeming like it has to be a giant task. Recovery simply is the ability to recover or to rest and redevelop your performance abilities after a performance session and going into the next. This might look like if you're a young athlete who, let's say you're in high school, you have practice at the end of school. So you finish practice, you go home, that's your moment, that's your time of rest and recovery before the next practice the next day. Or if we're working people and we have a work day, we work that 9 to 5, we come home, the time that it takes for us from when we got home before we start the next work day, we can kind of see I'm doing my task, I'm doing my work, I'm doing my sport, and then the space I have outside of that is the opportunities where we typically get to rest or recover. So, what does it involve? So, there's some interesting ideas that surround this, and we want to break down recovery because usually we just hear recovery as the physical, right? And the physical part is really important, right? Where I'm resting my body, I'm allowing it to restore. Uh, we think about exercise, right? When I'm doing exercise, I create little muscular tears, so the resting process allows my body to heal. And so there's two main aspects of the physical recovery. So we have passive recovery and we have active recovery. Passive recovery, this is something that is very light. This might be falling under the category of stretching. This would entail some meditative work, maybe breath work. This is stuff that does not take a lot of physical demand on the body. And then there's active work, right? So this is where we might be engaging in light cardio, maybe lower volumes in our lifting routine. We think about the transition from one season to the next, or we just finished a season. We usually have a few weeks in between transitioning from one sport to the next. Being a three sport athlete myself, we were required in high school to have 2 weeks in between that allowed us to recover from the high demand, the high impact of our sport, so we could settle in and have a little bit of a healthier integration going into the next season. And then there's the psychological aspects of recovery. And this is how do I give myself the mental break away from thinking about the sport? Now, this is probably one of the harder parts because you heard me just talking about recovery as like having weeks, having days, where realistically, we don't have that time. Most athletes in general, typically don't have a whole day to recover, right? You have maybe an hour, maybe a few hours, maybe it's simply as soon as you get home and you have all these other priorities that you have to take care of. How do we make this bite size? And what do we even do when we have those breaks? There's so many other things in my life that are going on. How do I really tackle what it is that I need to do for myself? So we want to look at this scissor model. Kelman's scissor model was done in 2002, and it proposes that for the amount of stress that we experience, we should try to find the balance of recovery in that experience. So we want to make sure that we have an even playing field with the amount of stress that I take on should be balanced by the amount of rest I take on. If we handle more stress and we drop our recovery, we start building this maladaptive or this non-beneficial level of stress that starts taxing us physically and mentally. So how do we find the balance between these two? And we found that there were a few different methods that helped chunk how to address what it is that myself or the performer needs to be able to handle or even take steps towards to understanding recovery. So we want to look at how is my stress in this moment? If we were to kind of just take it real slow. If you're sitting at home right now and you're listening to this or you're watching this, I want you to just take a moment to feel your body, whether you need to close your eyes and catch a couple of breaths. Feel where your body is at. Is there a lot of tension in your body? And with that tension, are you having a lot of thoughts about maybe the thing that you need to do next? Or I got to get ready for practice, or I've got a lot of schoolwork, or I've got to get ready for work tomorrow. I have to make dinner. Are there a lot of these thoughts that have you chasing the next activity? And if you are having those moments, we need to, one, be real with ourselves in those moments. It's not that I need to make these moments disappear. It's that I need to listen to what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking. And how do I bring myself to simply be with myself? Now, once we've kind of allowed ourselves to settle into that, we have to ask the question of what am I going to do to close the gap? Close the gap between the stress that I am experiencing and the recovery that I need. And everybody has a different approach to how they need recovery. So let's talk about a few strategies that surround the idea of recovery. For some people, again, we'll talk about, let's readdress those active and passive bits of recovery. So, passive recovery, again, we might be engaging in a sense in like deep breath work. The goal of deep breath work is to realign our nervous system. The human body is made of a bunch of electrical signals, and our body's constantly talking to our mind. And depending on how much stress we're taking on, our body might be really communicating a lot to the brain. And the brain, if it gets used to this over communication, it starts kind of putting things to the side like, okay, well, yeah, you're naturally like this stressed out anyway, so why does it matter? You can take it. And we need to work on flipping that narrative. So if you're sitting with yourself and you're taking those few breaths and your mind's telling you, oh, I'm exhausted, I'm having a really hard time balancing this, this, and this, and I'm not really sure what I need to be doing for myself. That's the moment of that deep breath and meditation where you're sitting with it. And you're not trying to solve it right away. You're simply just trying to understand what it is that your body is feeling. And so we really have to build this sense of self awareness. And that passive modality really helps us because it allows us to simply sit with it. Once we've kind of got a feel for passive methods and we're able to listen and gather a couple of points for ourselves, then we might be able to move on to a different activity, whether that might be, I haven't really had a lot of time for myself with maybe it's enjoying a hobby. I like to write poetry, or I like to really read different books, or I like to paint. I like to listen to music. I like to write music. Whatever your outside hobby, outside of what it is that you do, whether you're a performer, whether you're a worker, whether you're a parent, right? We need to have moments that allow us to be with ourselves, that allow us to step away from the priority or your typical priority, because you're more than just one thing. You're more than just a worker. You're more than just a performer. You're more than just one identity. And so we need to find balance in those identities. So figuring out, how do I distance myself from this main thing that gives me enough time to mentally recover. Now we talk about the active moments of recovery again. So again, some of us we're constantly doing a lot of work. And let's take a weight room for example. During an in season, we might be working more on strength and power during our lifting in season. And the reasons are typically because, what does my body need at that time, right? If I think about a track athlete, a thrower, for example, a lot of what they're doing is power and strength related. I need to be able to be explosive. I need to be able to move this thing as far as I can, so I need to be really strong and really powerful to move this. So the majority of my season lifting is going to be relatively heavy and relatively demanding. So as I get closer towards the end of the season, my body over the course, let's say we're outdoor season, over the course of 3 months is taxed. It's physiologically, my body sensations, my nervous system, my muscles are all going to be exerted. So we talk about a deload phase towards the end of the season, where we give our body the opportunity to still do work, but at a lower volume. Maybe it's at a lower rep count, a lower percentage of a one rep max. We're giving our body the opportunity to step away from the high intensity while still being able to get exercise and keep our body engaged. And this serves us to help reduce the stiffness and soreness. If I just went from being in an intense training regimen and just completely stopped, my body is going to have a negative reaction to that. I'm going to be really stiff. I'm going to be really sore, and I might have like a lot of tender spots. I might not be able to move as well. So this active sense of recovery aids us in both being able to maintain our ability to perform a task. And then we also got to work on, let's say, the mobility and flexibility, which may allow us to incorporate more dynamic stretching, some yoga. And so these physical parts allow us to distance ourselves a little bit from the sport as well and focus on, what does my body need from me right now? And a lot of what we do can't just happen in one session. So I've led a couple of sessions in the experience of working on PMR, right, progressive muscle relaxation, and maybe that's the one 20-minute block where athletes are actually recovering. And if that's the case, that 20 minutes won't serve them very well over the course of a week of where they're training. So as coaches and as performance coaches, our job is to try to find out how to teach the young athletes how to integrate smaller chunks for themselves. Because again, what did we define recovery as? We defined recovery as the ability to rest and rebuild your performance capabilities in between training sessions. If I only have relaxation recovery session that's 20 minutes long, and the athlete then goes home, is completely mentally taxed in their activity, and then they don't have that moment to separate, that 20 minutes will dissolve by the next day they walk into school. Well, that sounds like it could be a lot of responsibility. Well, the question is, how much do you value your ability to want to excel in your sport or want to excel in your profession? Because if you value your ability to perform, then you also have to value your ability to recover. And so this takes a nice three-step approach of I need to know my body, I need to listen to my body, and I need to respect my body. And when we think about knowing the body, it's what is my body expected to do? When I think about listening to my body, it's what's going on inside? Am I feeling that tension? Am I constantly thinking about this thing? And how, and can I really understand what I feel or do I dismiss it? And then respecting my body is truly taking what my body's communicating to me and honoring it. If I'm doing work throughout the day and my body is starting to crash and I'm like, oh man, like my body needs a nap. I need to respect my body's decision to take that nap and be able to take that moment to simply recover and experience that nap. And then by the time I wake up, then I can recalibrate what it is that I'm trying to accomplish. Recovery can be difficult to manage in the beginning. Again, how do you value it? How important is your performance to you? Because if your performance is important to you, then we also needs to be that recovery is equally as important. If you're looking to find more tips, more strategies about how I can understand recovery or what recovery modalities might work best for me, please feel free to leave a comment or feel free to send me a message directly, and I'll be more than happy to provide resources for you. I hope that this was a beneficial conversation or a beneficial discussion to get us started on the road to understanding what recovery is, what types of recovery there are, and how I can start bringing it to the forefront. I hope you enjoyed this. If you like what's going on so far, please feel free to follow or follow me on my Soul Strength Instagram page. I look forward to hearing from you soon.